It was my daughter's birthday, and I arrived early, the way I always did. I stood on the front steps of the Montecito estate, holding a cake box with both hands, careful not to tilt it. Inside was a French almond and passion fruit cake I had ordered 3 months in advance from a small patisserie in Pasadena. The owner had called it a work of art. It had cost me $760, nearly 2 months of my teacher's pension. But when you have spent 44 years loving someone the way I loved Savannah, you stop counting the cost. Or at least you tell yourself you do. I adjusted my turquoise dress, the one I had bought specifically for this day, and pressed the doorbell. My name is Dorothy Hargrove. I am 72 years old. I taught English literature at a public school in Santa Barbara for 38 years. I raised one daughter, mostly alone after my husband Robert passed when I was 54. I am not a dramatic woman. I do not exaggerate. I say that because what I am about to tell you will sound dramatic. But every word of it is true. The door opened. Savannah stood in the frame wearing a silk robe, her hair in a loose bun, phone pressed to her ear. She looked at me the way you look at a package left by a delivery driver. Mildly inconvenient, easily ignored. "Oh, Mom." She stepped back to let me in without ending her call. "Just put it in the kitchen." No hug, no smile, not even happy you came. I walked alone through the marble entryway, the same Italian marble I had helped pay for during the kitchen renovation 2 years ago, and set the cake carefully on the island counter. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the infinity pool overlooking the Pacific. Lily and Owen, my 12-year-old grandchildren, were doing laps with their private swim instructor. Neither of them looked up. I stood in that kitchen for 15 minutes before Savannah came in. I want to stop here for a moment, because if you are going to understand what happened next, what happened that afternoon, and everything that followed, you need to understand the full weight of what I carried into that house. Not just the cake. Not just the small silver box in my purse containing a pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother and her mother before her. 3 generations of women who had survived things far harder than this. I carried 44 years. When Savannah was 6 years old, she was diagnosed with severe asthma. The treatments the insurance wouldn't cover cost $1,100. I sold my wedding ring. I told myself I didn't need a ring to remember my marriage. Robert was still alive then, and he cried when he found out. I told him to stop. "She needs to breathe," I said. That's all that matters. When she was 17 and desperately wanted to join a student exchange program in France, I mortgaged my condo to pay the $14,000 fee. She hugged me at the airport so tightly I could barely breathe. "You're the best mom in the world," she said. I kept those words folded up in my heart for years, like a photograph I could take out whenever I needed to remember. In college, Savannah changed her major 3 times, from pre-law to marketing to interior design. Each change came with new tuition, new supplies, new explanations of why this was the right path. I paid $27,000 total, scraped together from weekend tutoring and grading papers at midnight. I never complained once, not once. Her first wedding, 280 guests, the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, an imported orchestra from New York, cost $22,000. She was radiant. I sat in the front row in a dress I had bought on clearance and thought, this is what all of it was for. That marriage lasted 2 years. Her second wedding was somehow more expensive. $19,000. That marriage lasted 18 months. Then came Preston Whitfield, her third husband, and a real estate venture in Montecito that required a down payment I could barely imagine. But Savannah called me crying, said it was their dream home, said she had never wanted anything more in her life. I contributed $95,000, 38 years of teaching, summer tutoring, and every corner I had ever cut on myself. My name went on the deed as partial owner. I told myself it was an investment. To open her day spa, Savannah Glow, she needed $180,000 in startup capital. I secured it by taking out a second mortgage on my condo. The loan was never repaid. When I brought it up 2 years later, she said, "Mom, the business is still growing. Can we not do this right now?" I bought her a Mercedes when her old car broke down. $13,000. I paid the twins' tuition at their bilingual academy, $3,200 per semester. And when Preston came to me urgently last spring saying he needed $4,500 for a time-sensitive investment opportunity, I took it from the envelope I kept in my nightstand. The one marked medications. I want you to sit with that for a moment. I skipped my blood pressure medication for 6 weeks so my son-in-law could invest in something that, as far as I know, never existed. Total, over 44 years, $263,000. I know that number exactly because I am, at heart, a careful woman. I kept every receipt, every contract, every bank transfer confirmation in a shoebox under my bed. Not because I was keeping score, but because my mother taught me that a woman who doesn't track her own money doesn't own her own life. I wish I had listened to that lesson sooner. Savannah came into the kitchen looking flawless. Ombre highlights, soft makeup, glossy gel nails. She opened the refrigerator, pulled out a sparkling water, and looked at the cake box on the counter with the same expression she might give a lamp she didn't remember ordering. "So," she said, "are you staying for dinner or just dropping off?" I felt the sting of it but kept my voice steady. "I thought we could have dinner together. It's been almost 2 months since I've seen you." She leaned against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "Preston's taking me to Nobu tonight. Just the 2 of us." "Of course," I swallowed. "Maybe lunch tomorrow then?" She set her phone down. Something shifted in the room. A change in pressure, almost physical. The way the air feels before a summer storm rolls in off the coast. Savannah looked at me directly, not with warmth, not with guilt, with the flat, deliberate expression of someone who has rehearsed something and decided today is the day they finally say it. "Mom," she said slowly, "I think we need to talk." She gestured to the stools along the kitchen island. I sat down. My hands folded themselves in my lap the way they always did when I was bracing for something. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "About my life, about my birthday, about what would genuinely make me happy." "Of course, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. "Tell me. Maybe I can help." She looked at me for a long moment, and then, in a voice so calm and deliberate it felt almost clinical, she said, "What I want most for my birthday is for you to disappear from my life. It would honestly be better for everyone if you just weren't here anymore." The world did not spin. The marble floor did not crack. No alarm sounded. The refrigerator hummed quietly. Outside, I could hear Lily and Owen splashing in the pool. The Pacific glittered in the afternoon light, indifferent and beautiful. I heard myself say very quietly, "What?" "You heard me," Savannah said. She wasn't shouting. That was the part I couldn't process. She wasn't shouting. She was calm, almost relieved, the way people are when they finally say the thing they have been holding in too long. "I'm tired, Mom. The constant calls, the surprise visits, the outdated advice, the need you have to be involved in every single part of my life." My hands had started to tremble. I pressed them together harder. "Savannah," I said, "I'm your mother. I gave up everything," she cut in, standing up straighter. "Yes, I know. You've told me. And that is exactly why I can't breathe. Your sacrifice is a weight I've been carrying for years. I need space. I need to live my life without you orbiting it constantly. I need you to take care of yourself and leave me alone." I looked at the cake on the counter, the candles still in their cellophane wrapper in my purse, the small silver box I hadn't taken out yet. 44 years, $263,000. "But Savannah," I said quietly, "I just want to be close to you, to be part of your life." "That's the problem," she said, folding her arms. "I can't be your whole world anymore. It's too heavy. It's always been too heavy." My legs were shaking as I stood up. I picked up my purse. I left the cake on the counter. I thought at least the children might enjoy it. At the door, I stopped and turned back. I don't know why. Some old reflex, I suppose. Some hope that I'd see a crack in her expression. A flicker of regret. Something that said I didn't mean it quite like that. There was nothing. Only impatience. "Happy birthday, Savannah," I whispered, and I closed the door behind me. She didn't know, she couldn't have known, that in the moment she said those words, she didn't break me, she woke me up. The taxi dropped me at my apartment downtown. I have lived there for 15 years, ever since I sold the family home after Robert died. It is a small place. 2 bedrooms, a narrow balcony overlooking the parking garage, a kitchen that fits exactly 1 person comfortably. I used to apologize for it when Savannah visited. I used to buy fresh flowers and hide the frayed corner of the living room rug with the coffee table. I stumbled inside and let my purse fall to the floor. I sat on the old sofa. The same one where I had cradled a 6-year-old Savannah through asthma attacks, read bedtime stories until my voice gave out, held her while she cried after every heartbreak, every disappointment, every dream that didn't quite land the way she had hoped. And then the full weight of what she had said pressed down on my chest like something physical. It would honestly be better for everyone if you just weren't here anymore. I didn't sleep. I lay on that sofa until the apartment went fully dark and then light again, replaying every year, every dollar, every dream I had quietly folded up and put away so that hers could have more room. At 4 a.m, I got up, went to the bedroom closet, and pulled out the shoebox. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, and I wrote down every number I could account for, every receipt, every transfer, every time I had chosen her comfort over my own survival. The grand total stared up at me from a yellow legal pad in my own handwriting. $263,000. For a long time, I just looked at it. And then something strange happened. Something I did not expect. Something I cannot fully explain even now. The sharp, suffocating pain in my chest began to change. Not disappear. Change. It hardened into something cooler and clearer, like glass that has been through fire and come out stronger on the other side. I thought, if I had kept this money, if I had spent even half of it on myself, I could have traveled. I could have bought a better home. Not a mansion, but something with a garden, something with light. I could have invested. I could have funded the sabbatical year I had dreamed about for 2 decades, the one where I was going to write a book about teaching literature to children who had never been given a reason to love words. Instead, I was sitting in a small apartment at 4 a.m, rationing blood pressure medication, being told by my daughter that I should cease to exist. I set down the pen. I looked out the dark window at the parking garage lights, and I made a decision. Quietly, completely, with a certainty I had not felt about anything in years. This ends now, not her life. Mine begins. By 6 a.m, I had showered, dressed in the beige suit I had bought for a conference 3 years ago, and never worn because I didn't want to pay for dry cleaning, and I was standing outside my building in the early coastal fog with a list in my hand. Not a grocery list, not a to-do list for someone else's needs. A list of every step I was about to take, for myself, starting that morning. Before I left the apartment, I did the one thing I had never done in 44 years of motherhood. I picked up my phone and blocked Savannah's number, then Preston's, then every number in my contacts associated with their household. It took 4 minutes. It felt like setting down something I had been carrying so long I had forgotten it had weight. My first stop was the bank. Linda Carmichael, the branch manager who had processed a dozen transactions for me over the years, looked up from her desk with her usual professional smile. "Mrs. Hargrove, good morning. What can I do for you today?" "Good morning, Linda." I sat down and placed my hands flat on the desk. "I'd like to close the joint emergency account I share with my daughter. Account ending in 7214. A small pause. "Of course. I'll just pull that up." She typed briefly, then glanced at the screen. "There's a balance of $9,800 in that account. Are you sure you'd like to close it?" "I'm absolutely certain," I said. "Please transfer the full balance to my personal account." I signed the paperwork with a steady hand. Watching $9,800 return to my name, money I had deposited faithfully for years against the possibility that Savannah might need it someday, gave me a feeling I hadn't experienced in longer than I could remember. Not anger, not vindication. Power. The quiet, solid, self-possessed kind. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself. My second stop was the mortgage finance office, because here is something Savannah had never paid close attention to. When Preston and Savannah purchased the Montecito property, I had not merely contributed to the down payment. My name was on the deed. I had co-signed the mortgage. At the time, it had been framed as a formality, a way to help them qualify. But it meant something very specific under California property law. It meant I had legal standing. And 2 weeks earlier, the last time Savannah had actually spoken to me before the birthday visit, she had mentioned, almost in passing, that Preston had missed the most recent mortgage payment. She had said it the way she always mentioned their financial troubles. Casually, with an underlying current of, "And you'll help us fix it, won't you, Mom?" I had said nothing at the time. Now I sat across from the loan officer and asked her to walk me through every legal option available to a co-signer when primary borrowers demonstrate financial instability. I took notes. I requested copies of every document that bore my name. When I left that office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not because I wanted Savannah to suffer, but because I was finally, living in reality instead of the comfortable fiction I had been constructing for 4 decades. My final stop that morning was a small travel agency 2 blocks from the waterfront. New Horizons, Journeys for the Young at Heart. I had walked past it dozens of times over the years. Once, about 3 years ago, I had gone inside and taken one of their brochures. I had kept it in my nightstand drawer ever since, folded and slightly worn at the edges, the way you keep something you are not quite ready to throw away. The young consultant inside looked up with a bright smile. "Welcome in. How can I help you today?" I sat down across from her and placed the brochure on the desk between us. "I'd like to learn about your programs for retirees starting over abroad," I said. "Specifically, what would it take for a 72-year-old woman to begin a new life in Spain?" The days that followed were unlike anything I had experienced since I was a young woman. Tuesday, Savannah called 11 times. I watched the phone light up and felt nothing but resolve. Her voicemails moved in a predictable arc. First irritation, then confusion, then a sudden practical urgency that told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, the bank called about something with the mortgage. I need you to call me back right away." The bank had reached out about my request to review the cosigner terms. Reality, I thought, has a way of arriving right on schedule. Wednesday morning, my neighbor Barbara Donahue knocked on my door carrying 2 mugs of coffee and the no-nonsense expression of a woman who has seen enough of life to recognize a turning point when she sees one. Barb is 70 years old, sharp as a tack, and spent 22 years teaching drama at the same school district where I taught English. She has known me for nearly 2 decades. She has watched through the thin walls of neighborly proximity every sacrifice I made for Savannah. Every time I skipped a doctor's appointment to cover an unexpected expense. Every holiday I spent waiting by the phone. I told her everything, every word from the kitchen, every number from the legal pad. When I finished, Barb was quiet for a long moment. Her eyes had gone red at the edges. "Dot," she said finally, "I don't have words for how sorry I am." "I don't need sorry," I said. "I need your help." I explained the plan. Barb would have a spare key to my apartment. She would wait until Tuesday, 5 days after my departure, then go to Savannah's house in apparent distress, saying she had been trying to reach me for days, had finally used the spare key, and found the apartment empty. She would deliver the letter and the attached documents in person. Barb set down her coffee mug slowly. Then she smiled. The particular smile of a woman who spent 2 decades directing school productions and considers dramatic irony a personal value. "You know," she said, "I've been waiting 20 years for a role that actually matters." That evening, I wrote the most important document of my life. Not an email, not a text. A letter. 20 pages, handwritten on the lined paper I used to grade student essays, that began with these words. "My dear Savannah, you once told me that the greatest gift I could give you for your birthday was to disappear from your life. I have decided to honor that wish, completely, and in ways you did not anticipate." I wrote for 4 hours. I listed every dollar, every date, every sacrifice. Not with bitterness, I was past bitterness by then, but with the clear, documented precision of a woman who has spent her life believing that truth, stated plainly, is the most powerful thing in the world. Attached to the letter were the documents I had arranged that week, a revised will, the formal cancellation of the supplemental health insurance I had been quietly paying for their family, the notice of my intent to exercise my rights as co-signer and partial deed holder given evidence of financial instability, and a single-page statement confirming the termination of all financial support, effective immediately. I ended the letter with 12 words. "Your life will be lighter without me, but certainly more expensive." On Saturday, I walked through the city one last time, past the school where I had stood at the front of a classroom for 38 years, watching children fall in love with language. Past the park where a small Savannah had learned to ride her bicycle, screaming, "Don't let go, Mommy!" And I had held on, and on and on, long past the point when she needed me to. Past the church where Robert and I had married, where I had stood in a white dress and believed, with my whole heart, that love was enough to carry you through anything. It is, but only if it flows in both directions. Sunday morning, Barb stood at my door with coffee and a grin. "Ready for the great escape?" she asked. I looked at my 2 suitcases, everything I had decided to take. everything I had decided to leave behind. More ready than I've ever been in my life, I said. The taxi came at 8. As the driver loaded my bags into the trunk, I stood in the doorway of the apartment one last time. 15 years of small rooms and careful budgeting, and a life lived almost entirely in service of someone who had come to see that service as her birthright. I felt no grief, only the clean, terrifying, exhilarating feeling of a woman who has finally decided that her own life deserves to be lived. "To the airport," the driver said. "That's right," I replied, and those 2 words opened a door I had been standing outside of for 44 years. The flight to Barcelona was 11 hours and 40 minutes. I know because I watched the little airplane icon crawl across the screen on the seat back in front of me, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I had nowhere to be and no one waiting on me. No phone calls to return, no emergencies to manage, no quiet dread of what the next message might ask of me. I ordered a glass of red wine somewhere over the Atlantic. The flight attendant, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled when she handed it to me. "Traveling alone?" she asked. "For the first time in my life," I said. She looked at me for a moment, something passing across her face that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite admiration, but lived somewhere between the two. "Well," she said, "I hope it's everything you need it to be." I turned to the window. Below us was nothing but dark water and the faint reflection of stars. So do I thought. So do I. During those 11 hours, I opened the small journal I had bought at the airport gift shop. Navy blue, linen cover, the kind of thing I would have called an unnecessary expense 6 months ago. And I wrote everything down. Every detail of the past week, every decision, every feeling I had been too busy surviving to properly examine. At some point around hour 7, I wrote this. "For the first time in 44 years, I am doing something solely for myself. Not to ease Savannah's anxiety, not to solve a problem that was never mine to solve, not to be needed, just because I want to. It is the most terrifying and most freeing thing I have ever done. I am 72 years old, and I am only just now learning what it feels like to be the main character of my own story." I read that sentence back to myself 3 times. Then I closed the journal, finished my wine, and slept for 4 hours, the deepest, most untroubled sleep I'd had in years. When I landed at El Prat Airport on Monday morning, a young man was waiting in the arrivals hall holding a handwritten sign with my name. Dorothy Hargrove, New Horizons. His name was Tomas. Early 30s, warm handshake, a cheerful Catalan accent that made every sentence sound like good news. He drove me to the Gothic quarter, El Gotic, a neighborhood in the old city where the streets are narrow enough that 2 people can barely walk side by side, and every building is several centuries older than anything in California. My apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had been standing since 1887. The staircase was steep, and the elevator was approximately the size of a phone booth, but the apartment itself stopped me in the doorway. High ceilings, worn terracotta tile floors, a small kitchen with blue and white hand-painted tiles above the stove, and a balcony. A real balcony, not the narrow California kind, but a proper Spanish balcony with a wrought iron railing and 2 chairs and a view of a leafy plaza below where old men played chess and pigeons argued over crumbs. After Tomas left, I stood on that balcony for a long time. I wasn't thinking about Savannah. I wasn't thinking about the letter or the mortgage documents or what Preston might be doing at that precise moment. I was watching a woman in the plaza below hang laundry from a 2nd-floor window, humming something I couldn't quite make out, and I thought, people live here. Ordinary people live their ordinary lives here, and they are happy, and it has nothing to do with me, and that is completely fine. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk with no destination, no watch, no phone, no agenda, no one waiting for me to arrive or return. I wandered through streets so old the centuries felt layered into the stone itself, medieval churches tucked between tapas bars, bookshops with tables spilling out onto the cobblestones, the smell of garlic and olive oil drifting from restaurant kitchens, not yet open for the evening, street musicians playing something slow and unhurried in a sun-drenched plaza, while tourists photographed their own happiness. I stopped at a small cafe and ordered a café am lait, coffee with milk, and a plate of pain am tomate, bread rubbed with tomato and olive oil, which the woman behind the counter told me was the most important food in Catalonia, and I was not to leave without trying it. I sat at an outside table for an hour, just sat, watching, breathing. Inside my chest, where there had been a raw and open wound for the better part of a week, something quieter was beginning to settle. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The first installment of it. Wednesday morning, I met Raymond Ashford in a sun-filled office near the waterfront. He was in his late 60s, silver-haired, with the calm and unhurried manner of a man who had made his own version of what I was attempting and come out the other side intact. He had emigrated from Boston 15 years ago after what he described with a brief and diplomatic pause as a complicated family situation. I appreciated that he didn't ask me to elaborate on mine. He reviewed my finances carefully, my pension, my savings, the recent transfers, the expected proceeds from the legal proceedings I had set in motion. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, closing the folder, "with what you have now, and what you'll have once the property situation resolves, you can live very comfortably in Barcelona for the rest of your life. The cost of living here is significantly lower than Santa Barbara. The public health care system for registered foreign residents is excellent." He paused. "I have many clients who have made this same choice. You are not alone in this, Mrs. Hargrove, not by a long way." Those words did something unexpected to me. My throat tightened and I had to look out the window for a moment. You are not alone in this. I had felt alone in it for so long, in the slow erosion of myself, in the creeping doubt that perhaps I was asking too much just by existing. I had not known until that moment how much I needed to hear that other women had sat in this same place, had felt this same particular shame, had made this same impossible feeling choice. "Let's talk about investment options," I said, and I pulled out my notebook. That evening, for the first time since leaving the United States, I turned my phone on. 78 missed calls. 34 text messages. I read them in order, the way you read a case study, with detachment, looking for patterns. The first messages were emotional. "Mom, please call me." "Mom, where are you?" "Mom, the kids are asking for you." By day 2, practicality had entered. The bank called. "Something about the mortgage. I need to talk to you." By day 3, the tone shifted toward anger. "This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Call me back." By day 4, something closer to desperation. "I've called every hospital in Santa Barbara. I've called your friends. No one knows where you are. If something happens to you, I will never forgive myself." I noticed what was absent from all 34 messages. Not once, not in a single word across 4 days of increasingly frantic contact, did Savannah say, "I'm sorry for what I said to you." Every message was about what my disappearance was costing her. Not one was about what her words had cost me. I typed a single reply. "I am perfectly fine and happier than I have been in years. What you are experiencing right now is the natural consequence of your own choices. I hope it teaches you to appreciate the people who love you before it's too late." Her response came in 40 seconds. "Mom, please, we can fix this. Just come home. I promise I'll never say those things again." I wrote back, "Empty promises cannot mend what those words broke. What you said showed me exactly how you have seen me for a very long time. That truth cannot be undone by desperation." Then I blocked every number on the list, closed the phone, poured myself a glass of wine, and sat on my balcony watching the plaza below, where the evening had begun, and people were gathering at the cafe tables the way they do in Spain, slowly, without urgency, as though they have correctly understood that the whole point of an evening is to be inside it. It was nearly midnight when my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize, American area code, but not one I knew. Something made me answer. "Mom!" Savannah's voice came through broken and high and desperate in a way I had not heard since she was a child. "Mom, please. Barb gave me a new phone. Please don't hang up." I didn't hang up. I sat very still on the balcony and said, "Hello, Savannah. Where are you? Please just tell me you're safe." "I'm safe," I said. "I'm very well." "Mom, please come home. We need you. I need you. What you're doing. Disappearing like this. Tell me something," I said, keeping my voice very calm. "When you said what you said in your kitchen, on your birthday, did it occur to you that that wasn't fair?" Silence. "I told you I was stressed. The mortgage situation, Preston's investments, the kids at school. You were stressed," I said. "And the solution to your stress was to tell your mother that the world would be better off without her." "I didn't mean it like, you were very calm when you said it," I said. "You chose every word. You sat across from me at a kitchen counter I helped pay for, and you told me, clearly and deliberately, that your greatest birthday wish was for me to cease to exist. I heard that, completely, and I believed you. The silence this time was longer. When she spoke again, her voice had gone smaller. I need you, Mom. I really do. Do you need me? I asked. Or do you need what I provide? A pause that told me everything. The bank contacted you about the mortgage review, I said gently. The insurance cancellations have gone through. You've read the letter. You know about the will. And now suddenly you need me. That's not fair. 44 years, Savannah. $263,000. A wedding ring I sold when you were 6 years old. So you could breathe, Savannah. So you could simply breathe. My voice stayed even. I had done my grieving alone at a kitchen table in Santa Barbara, and I was not going to do it again on a balcony in Barcelona at midnight. For 44 years, I was available to you in every way a human being can be available to another. And when I finally needed your love, just your love, nothing else, you told me to disappear. Mom, please. I'm not angry at you, I said, and I meant it. I am genuinely, completely done being angry, but I will not come back. Not because I want to punish you, because I have finally, at 72 years old, chosen myself. And that choice is not reversible. What about the kids? She said. Lily and Owen are asking for you. The children will be fine, I said. They said. They are 12 years old and they have 2 parents. What they will learn from this, if you allow them to, is that actions have consequences and that the people who love us are not furniture. That is a more valuable lesson than anything I could teach them by coming home. Mom, take care of yourself, Savannah. I meant that too, fully, without irony. Good night. I ended the call. The city hummed quietly below me. Somewhere in the plaza, someone was playing guitar, soft and unhurried. A couple walked past arm in arm, their voices low and warm with each other. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. This, I thought, is what it feels like to tell the truth and survive it. 10 days after arriving in Barcelona, I was sitting in my Catalan language class when I saw a missed call from an unknown 805 area code. Santa Barbara. I called back during the break. Mrs. Dorothy Hargrove? A woman's voice, official and careful. Speaking. My name is Patricia Owens. I'm a caseworker with the Santa Barbara Department of Family and Adult Services. We've received a welfare concern report regarding your well-being. A brief pause. The report was filed by your daughter, Savannah Whitfield. She has indicated that she believes you may be experiencing cognitive decline and that you have been making erratic financial and personal decisions that suggest you may not be fully competent to manage your own affairs. I set down my coffee cup very carefully. She had reported me for dementia, not for missing, not for being in Spain, for cognitive decline. She had looked at every legal document I signed, the will revision, the mortgage review, the insurance cancellations, and rather than acknowledge that they were the rational decisions of a woman who had been pushed past her limit, she had constructed an alternate story, one in which her mother was not clear-eyed and deliberate, but confused, impaired, in need of intervention, one in which every document I had signed could potentially be contested. Miss Owens, I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt, I am completely and entirely sound of mind. I am sitting in a Catalan language class in Barcelona, which I enrolled in voluntarily. I have a financial advisor, a residency application in progress, and an apartment I am renting while I consider a permanent purchase. I planned this move over the course of 2 weeks with complete deliberation and in consultation with my attorney. I am happy to submit to any evaluation you require. Would you be willing to attend a psychological and cognitive assessment through the U.S. Consulate in Barcelona? I would be delighted, I said. Please schedule it at your earliest convenience. I hung up and immediately called my attorney, Gerald Sutton. Gerald, I said, Savannah has filed a report claiming I have dementia. A short silence, then. I was expecting something like this. She contacted my office last week. She's hired an attorney to contest the documents you signed before leaving, arguing you weren't competent at the time of signing. Can she succeed? Not a chance, he said. I have audio recordings of every meeting we had. You were precise, informed, and asked better questions than most of my 40-year-old clients. The fact that you then flew to Spain and immediately enrolled in language classes, opened investment accounts, And scheduled financial advising is not the behavior of a woman in cognitive decline. It is the behavior of a woman who finally has time to do what she wants. File the defamation countersuit, I said. Already drafting it, he said. With pleasure. The consulate assessment took place 2 weeks later. The evaluating physician, a doctor, Torres, calm and experienced, spent 3 hours with me. Cognitive tests, psychological evaluation, a long conversation about my decision-making process over the previous month. When he finished, he looked at me with something that might have been admiration. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, "you are in excellent cognitive and psychological health. Your recent decisions demonstrate remarkable clarity and forward planning. I will make that very clear in my report." 3 days after that, Patricia Owens called again. "Mrs. Hargrove, we've received the consulate report. The conclusion is unambiguous. The welfare case is closed, and your daughter will be formally notified that the claim was unsupported. This will be noted in our system." "Will that be on record?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "If she files a similar report in future, it will be considered in context." I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Gerald. "The welfare case is closed," he said before I could speak. "I heard this morning, and there's more good news. Savannah's attorney has withdrawn the competency challenge. Without the welfare case, they have nothing. Every document you signed stands exactly as written." I sat back and looked out the window at the Barcelona sky between the old buildings. "Thank you, Gerald." "One more thing," he said. "I spoke with the mortgage servicer. Preston missed 2 more payments while the legal challenge was ongoing. The foreclosure process is now formally underway. As co-signer and partial deed holder, you're in a protected position, and depending on how the sale proceeds, you may recover a substantial portion of your original investment." After I hung up, I opened my journal to a new page and wrote, "The truth, it turns out, is very good at taking care of itself. You just have to be willing to step back and let it." 3 weeks after arriving in Barcelona, a different email arrived, from a sender I didn't recognize. The subject line said only, "I owe you this." "Dorothy, I saw the interview you gave for the women's blog. I watched it twice. I want to tell you something I should have said years ago, and didn't, because I was too much of a coward. And because I was, if I'm honest, just as dependent on you as Savannah was. I watched her treat you the way she treated you for 7 years. I watched her take your calls and roll her eyes, receive your money, and forget to say thank you. I saw all of it, and I said nothing, because saying something would have meant confronting the fact that I was part of the same system. What she said to you on her birthday, I didn't know she'd said it until after Barb came with your letter. When Savannah told me, she framed it as something she said in the heat of the moment. I don't believe that. I think you're right that she meant it, at least in that moment. Lily and Owen miss you. Savannah told them you were unwell and couldn't visit. I haven't corrected that yet. They're 12, and the full truth is complicated. But I want you to know that when they are old enough, I intend to tell them what actually happened. They deserve to know who their grandmother really is. I know apologies from me don't fix anything, but I wanted you to know that at least one person in that house saw you clearly, and I'm sorry it took me this long to say so. I hope Spain is everything it should be. Preston. I read it 3 times. Then I walked out onto the balcony and stood there for a long time, looking out over the rooftops toward the faint glimmer of the Mediterranean. I cried. Not the way I had cried in the first days, not the sharp physical grief of betrayal. These were different tears, quieter, the kind that come when something you have been carrying alone for a very long time is finally, by someone else, acknowledged. Someone saw me. After all those years of wondering if I was imagining it, the dismissals, the dependency dressed up as closeness, someone who had been inside that house had said, I saw it. It was real, and it was wrong. I wrote back the same evening. Preston, thank you for this. I mean that without reservation. Please be the father Lily and Owen need, the one who teaches them that the people who love them are not resources to be managed, but human beings to be seen. That lesson, more than anything else, is what I hope they carry forward. Take care of yourself. Dorothy. The months that followed were the fullest I had lived in decades. I joined a Wednesday watercolor class in a studio off the Placa de Sant Felipe Neri, a square so quiet and sun-drenched it felt like the city's best-kept secret. I discovered, to my genuine astonishment, that I could paint. Not brilliantly, not yet, but with a kind of absorbed pleasure I recognized as the feeling of doing something purely for the love of it. Something I had not allowed myself in so long, I had forgotten it was available to me. I joined the senior expat walking group on Fridays. There were 14 of us, ranging in age from 63 to 81, all of us here for different reasons and united by the shared experience of having chosen, late in life, to start again. It was on one of those Friday walks, climbing the hill above the city toward the old anti-aircraft batteries that look out over all of Barcelona, that I met Vivian Hartley. She was 78, originally from Connecticut, and had been living in Barcelona for 4 years with the unruffled contentment of someone who has come to exactly the right decision and knows it. She walked with a wooden cane she clearly didn't need much, and laughed at things with her whole face. We fell into step together near the top of the hill. "What brought you here?" she asked, directly, without preamble, because when you are past 70 you have stopped pretending the small talk is the point. "My daughter told me," I said, "that her greatest birthday wish was for me to stop existing." Vivian was quiet for a moment. Below us, Barcelona stretched to the sea. "What did you do?" she asked. "I disappeared," I said, but not the way she meant. Vivian looked at me for a moment. Then she smiled. Not with pity, not with shock, but with the precise recognition of someone who has looked into a mirror they didn't know existed. "My son," she said, "contacted me exclusively when he needed money. When I started saying no, he told me I was selfish. Threatened to keep the grandchildren away if I didn't cooperate." She paused. "I moved here the following spring. Do you regret it?" "Every day for the first 3 months," she said honestly. "And then one morning I woke up and realized I had slept 8 hours without anxiety for the first time in a decade, and I haven't seriously regretted it since." She invited me that afternoon to join a support group she facilitated. Older women who had made the choice to put their own mental and emotional health before the endless demands of toxic family relationships. Women who were learning in various stages to live without guilt for choosing themselves. I said yes immediately. It was around this time that a blog post I had written about my experience began circulating widely online. The editor of a platform called Second Chapter had reached out after someone shared my story in a forum. She asked if I would write about my experience. I sat down one evening and wrote for 3 hours without stopping. The response was unlike anything I had anticipated. Within days, the post had been shared thousands of times. My inbox filled with messages from women across the country, across the world, who wrote to tell me they recognized themselves in what I had described. Not just in the cruelty of a single sentence, but in the long, slow accumulation of it. The way love becomes obligation, becomes exploitation so gradually that you don't notice the transition until you are standing in someone else's marble kitchen holding a $760 cake and wondering how you became invisible. Claire Sutherland, editorial director of a publishing house in New York that specialized in narrative nonfiction by and for women, reached out 3 weeks later. "Mrs. Hargrove, your story needs to be a book. Would you be willing to have a conversation?" I spent the next 4 months writing. I called it When Love Becomes a Cage, Breaking Free from Family Emotional Abuse After 65. It was memoir, yes, but I wanted it to be something more. A map for navigating the territory I had crossed. How to recognize when love has curdled into codependency. How to identify the language of manipulation. How to begin, at any age, the terrifying and necessary work of choosing yourself. Claire's team published it several months later. It became a bestseller, not because my story was extraordinary, but because it was, in its essential shape, so terribly ordinary. Because the experience it described was the experience of hundreds of thousands of women who had never seen their particular suffering named and validated in print. The book was translated into 9 languages. I received letters from women in Chile and Portugal and Japan, and a small town in rural Ohio that made me sit down and cry in the middle of perfectly ordinary afternoons. A woman from Lisbon wrote, "I sold my large house after reading your book. I live in a small apartment now that is entirely mine, and I sleep through the night for the first time in 11 years. A retired schoolteacher from Birmingham, Alabama wrote, "I taught 31 years. I gave my children everything I had. And then I read your book, and I understood for the first time that a person can love their children completely and still refuse to be consumed by them. Thank you for that permission." I kept every letter. I have them in a box on the shelf above my desk. The desk in the apartment I eventually bought, with my own money, with a view of the Mediterranean. Then came a letter forwarded to me by Claire from a young woman named Abigail, 29 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. Dear Mrs. Hargrove, I am writing to you because I owe you something I don't know how to properly pay. I am 29. My mother is 64. She has spent her entire adult life doing for me and my brother what you spent your life doing for Savannah, sacrificing her comfort, her savings, her dreams. Because she loved us, and because we let her, and because no one ever told us, clearly, that this was not love. It was extraction. I didn't understand that until I read your book. Last month I called my mother. We talked for 3 hours. I apologized. Really apologized. Not the kind that asks for forgiveness, but the kind that simply says, I see what I did, and I see what it cost you, and I am going to spend the rest of my life doing better. I asked her what she had always wanted to do and never done. She said she had always wanted to learn to sail. She starts lessons next month. You wrote your book for women like yourself, but it saved a relationship between a mother and a daughter who might otherwise have ended up exactly where you and Savannah ended up. You stopped our version of that story before it happened. Abigail. I read that letter 4 times. Then I walked out onto my balcony and stood in the Barcelona wind for a long time. Savannah's cruelty had, in the most unexpected and roundabout way, prevented someone else's daughter from becoming Savannah. I don't have a clean word for that, but I felt it settle into me like something that had been waiting a long time to find its place. It arrived on a Thursday morning, 2 years after I had left Santa Barbara. A cream-colored envelope with American stamps, addressed in the slightly uneven handwriting of children who are not quite children anymore. Inside were 2 pages of lined notebook paper and 2 drawings on heavier art paper. Dear Grandma Dorothy, Dad told us the truth about why you left. He said that Mom said things that really hurt you and that you decided to start a new life for yourself. He said it took a lot of courage and that you were right to go. We've been thinking about what to say to you for a long time. I kept writing letters and throwing them away. Owen just kept putting it off because he didn't know how to say what he wanted to say without crying. I'm Lily, by the way, in case you couldn't tell. Owen's handwriting is worse than mine, which is saying something. We miss you. We miss the way you smelled like lavender and old books. We miss the way you always asked us what we had learned that day, like learning things was the most interesting thing a person could do, and the way you actually listened to the answer instead of looking at your phone. We miss the almond cake. We know that probably sounds shallow, but it doesn't just taste like cake to us. It tastes like you thinking about us months before you came. We're proud of you. We know that might sound strange coming from us, but we talked about it and we both agreed. What you did took more courage than anything we've ever seen a person do. You built a whole new life from scratch because you decided you deserved one. When we're older, old enough to make our own choices, we hope you'll let us come to Barcelona. We want to see the city you chose, if you'll have us. We love you, Grandma. We never stopped. Lily and Owen. Lily's drawing showed me sitting on a balcony, the Mediterranean spread out below in careful shades of blue and green, a glass of wine on the railing, and an expression on my face that, despite the imprecision of a teenager's art class pencils, was unmistakably at peace. Owen's showed me at the front of a classroom, somewhere imagined, with arched windows and students of many nationalities, and me at the board in mid-sentence, clearly in the middle of something that mattered. He had drawn me as a teacher, as someone with something still to give, still to say, still to teach. I sat down on the bottom step of the lobby staircase and cried for a long time. Not the grief of betrayal. Warmer tears. The kind that don't diminish you, but fill you back up, slowly, with something you hadn't realized had been depleted. When I was done, I climbed 3 flights of stairs, made myself a coffee, sat at my desk, and wrote back. My dear Lily and Owen, your letter is the most beautiful thing I have received in more years than I can count. I have read it 4 times. I will read it many more. I want you to know something important. I left because I needed to. I stayed away because I needed to. But neither of those choices was ever about you. In every version of every decision I made, you were the part of my heart I carried with me to Spain. You were always the exception. You always will be. Owen, you drew me as a teacher. I have taught all my life, and I expect I will keep finding ways to teach for whatever years remain to me, because it is the truest thing I know how to do. That you saw that in me, across 2 years and an ocean, means more to me than I have words for. Lily, you drew me at peace. I finally am, When you are old enough to choose for yourselves, the door to my home in Barcelona will be open. We will walk these streets. We will eat the almond cake. We will sit on the balcony and watch the Mediterranean do what it has been doing since long before either of us existed. And I will ask you what you have learned. I love you both with my whole heart. Your Grandma Dorothy. The final email arrived on a quiet Sunday morning about 3 years after I had left Santa Barbara. I was at my desk working on the proposal for a second book when the notification appeared. The sender address was unfamiliar, but the name in the display field stopped me. Savannah Whitfield. I sat for a moment without opening it. Then I did. Mom, I finished your book last night. I started it 3 times before I could get through it. The first 2 times I put it down after the first chapter because I told myself it was exaggerated or one-sided or that you didn't understand the pressure I was under. The 3rd time I made myself keep reading. I don't know exactly when I started crying. Somewhere around chapter 4, I think, where you listed the receipts. I remembered some of them. The exchange program, the wedding, the clinic. I had always thought of them as things you gave me because you wanted to, because it made you happy to give. I had never let myself understand that they came from somewhere, that they cost you something real. I'm not writing to ask you to come home. I know that's not possible. I'm not writing to ask you to forgive me either. Yes, not because I don't want your forgiveness, but because I understand now that what I said to you in that kitchen is not the kind of thing that gets undone by an email. Some words go too deep. I know that. I'm writing because I read your book, and I finally understood something I should have understood 30 years ago. You were a person, not just my mother, not just a source of support and money and availability, a person with dreams and desires and a finite amount of life, and you spent the overwhelming majority of it making mine easier, and I responded to that by telling you I wished you were gone. I have no defense for that. I don't have an explanation that makes it acceptable. I think about that afternoon in the kitchen every day. I think about the way you said happy birthday before you closed the door. I think about the fact that you were carrying a pearl necklace that belonged to your mother, and you took it with you, and I never even asked what was in that box. I am trying to be better. For Lily and Owen, mostly. They deserve a mother who shows them that people are worth seeing, not just using. But also for myself, because I look at the person I was in that kitchen and I don't recognize her, and I don't want to be her anymore. I don't know if you'll read this. I don't know if you'll respond. I am sending it anyway because I needed you to know that your book reached me. That you reached me. Even now. Even after everything. I hope Spain is everything it should be. From the photos on the blog, it looks like it is. I love you, Mom. I know I have a very strange way of showing it. I'm working on that. Savannah. I closed the laptop. I walked out onto the balcony. The morning was clear and bright, and the Mediterranean was doing what it always does. Existing, shimmering, indifferent in the best possible way, reminding you that the world is very large and very old, and that your particular grief and your particular joy are both real and both temporary and both worth having. I stood there for a long time. I thought about a 6-year-old girl with asthma, gasping in a hospital bed, and the feeling of holding her hand and thinking, I would give anything. I would give everything. I thought about an airport in Los Angeles, a 17-year-old with a backpack and shining eyes, turning back once to wave before disappearing through security. I thought about a front row seat at a Ritz-Carlton wedding, a clearance rack dress, and thinking, this is what all of it was for. I thought about a marble kitchen in Montecito, about words spoken in a calm, deliberate voice, about a door closing, and I thought about this balcony, this morning, this life, improbable, late arriving, completely mine. I called Vivian. She wrote to me, I said when she answered. Savannah, a real letter, not asking for anything, just saying she finally understood. Vivian was quiet for a moment. How do you feel? She asked. I feel, I said slowly, like when a storm has been going on for so long you stopped noticing the sound of it. And then it stops, and the silence is so complete you don't quite know what to do with it. That's not the worst feeling, Vivian said. No, I agreed. It isn't. Are you going to respond? I thought about it. Not today, I said finally. Maybe not this week, but I think perhaps one day, when I know what I want to say, when I'm sure I'm saying it because I want to, and not because I feel I should. That sounds right, Vivian said. The thing is, I said, working it out as I spoke, I don't want to go back. I don't want what we had before. Not any version of it. But I think there might be room, somewhere further down the road, for something new. Something that starts from truth instead of from the old story. If she means what she says. If she does the works of becoming someone who can hold that kind of relationship without destroying it. And if she doesn't? Then I will be fine, I said. I am fine. I am genuinely, completely, unexpectedly fine. Vivian laughed softly. Yes, she said. I know. I can hear it. That evening I opened my journal to a new page. I wrote, Savannah once said the best birthday gift I could give her was to disappear from her life. I disappeared, but I did not vanish. I did not diminish. I did not become smaller or quieter or less. I became, for the first time in 44 years, entirely myself. She wanted me gone. What she got instead was a mother who is no longer afraid of her disappointment, of her anger, of her silence, of her need. A mother who loves her, and always will, from a distance that is no longer painful, but simply honest. I do not know what comes next between us. I am, at 75, done pretending to know how stories end. What I know is this. I am sitting on a balcony in Barcelona. The Mediterranean is doing what it always does. I have a glass of wine and a journal, and more good years ahead of me than I probably deserve. I have friends who know my name and my story and show up anyway. I have 2 grandchildren who drew me as a woman at peace, a woman still teaching, a woman worth finding. I have a book on shelves in 9 languages that has helped women I will never meet find their way back to themselves. I have at last a life that belongs to me. It cost everything I thought I had, and it was worth every single cent. I closed the journal, set it on the table beside my wine glass, looked out at the sea. Below in the plaza, the evening was beginning the way evenings begin in Barcelona, slowly, warmly, with no particular urgency. A musician had set up near the cafe and was playing something unhurried and beautiful. Couples were arriving. Old friends were greeting each other with the particular joy of people who have known each other long enough to mean it. Someone laughed, a full, unguarded, generous laugh, and it rose up through the warm evening air and reached me on my balcony like a gift. I leaned back in my chair. I thought, I am 75 years old, and I am only just beginning. And I smiled. Not at anyone, not for anyone. Just because the evening was beautiful and the wine was good, and the sea was there, and I was here, and after everything, against all the odds of a lifetime spent being slowly, lovingly, completely erased, I was still here. I was still here. Some gifts arrive wrapped in cruelty. Savannah gave me the worst words a mother can hear, and in doing so, gave me back the only thing I had ever truly needed, myself. Dorothy Hargrove, Barcelona.